Hello to everyone listening from around the world. My name is Angela Giuffrida. I'm the Rome correspondent for The Guardian. Welcome to the third day of the conference. We have met online in this unusual and new way from Italy, Bangladesh, Spain, Pakistan, Uruguay, Georgetown, South Africa. The resonance and response from different parts of the world and people prove that this issue is relevant to people and dialogues today. We need to speak more about this. It is pretty evident that cities are where rights are, and that must be protected and enabled. Today we explore the role of cities, and we begin with a welcome message from the Councillor of Culture for the City of Rome. Please welcome Eleonora Guadagno.
Buongiorno.
Good morning to everyone. Today it's Saturday, it's the third day of this conference, and it is devoted to the city and urban centres and their relationship with participation in cultural life, as we read in the Charter of Rome 2020. We have heard important contributions that have met with our warm welcome as food for thought. And also we've heard about concrete projects carried out by the local administrators. And what has emerged clearly is that cities play a crucial role as engines in the economy, as drivers, as places for collectivity, innovation, connection, also because they are a crucible of services, really. We know that in Europe, 70% of the population is currently located in cities. And in the years to come, we will get to amounts as high as 80%. And this is also because cities, because of the density, represent places where problems also concentrate, but where also solutions emerge. So problems that we know well, such as poverty, segregation, but these are also fertile grounds for science and technology, for culture and innovation. And I think it is important to say that today, more than ever, we must understand how to face these challenges, the various challenges that cities all over the world will have to rise up to. And that is why we thought it was important to build an instrument that would help the cities to look towards the future and face these crises. And the Charter represents all this. An important meeting point, a reference point, at times that are so uncertain as it happens today. And it must also represent a beacon, a guidance for the cities, a useful instrument. And this crisis has highlighted very clearly how we need new governance solutions based on the enhancement of the role of citizens, the participation of citizens in an innovative use of the social capital. And today, this space for debate has an extraordinary value. And policies, particularly at the local level, and we have personally experienced this for a long time, have played a role that was sort of set apart. So the authorities that had to deal with the various issues, particularly in the cultural sector, were always focused on specific and limited environments and sectors. And the Charter of Rome, in this sense, represents a great evolution of this approach because it places cultural rights at the center of what should inspire political action. So we are particularly proud today to speak about it because democracy is not democracy unless it is also cultural democracy and unless we ensure inclusion and participation. And this is a principle that is not to be taken for granted. So working to promote the right to culture means, in practical terms, to knock down barriers and obstacles that prevent our cities and civilization from developing. And I'm not speaking about abstraction. Some important aspects are represented by the crisis we are living through these days, not just the pandemic, but we also have migration flows that have highlighted very clearly that there isn't a smaller, that cultural services do not play a smaller role than the other services that the public administration can grant and deliver. During the lockdown, the need for taking care of the people who had been hit by the coronavirus and the families, the households that went through these difficult times from a social and economic perspective, went hand in hand with the need for producing and enjoying culture. And I would say this was essential in many respects and for many different purposes, whether we speak about giving people some respite or looking for extraordinary solutions to face events that are totally new, disconcerting, and particularly a social cohesion and solidarity, without which Rome itself would not have been able to overcome these huge problems and therefore find a way out. So it is clear that on the foreground we are now seeing the importance of the local communities sharing common goals shared among the various citizens, so that the measures adopted by governments would be effective and provide concrete answers to this challenge. Social cohesion is not something that you can build without cultural cohesion or participation. There is a topic that has emerged strongly, which is the cross-sectional nature of some cultures that culture has to do with, from education to science, technology, research, development. So starting from education, from the discovery of one's roots, of the cultural and architectural heritage that is spread all over the city. Well, in this connection, the challenge consists in making all this accessible to all those people who also, during these days, were left out. The cultural offer that Rome gave, in particular, at this present time of crisis, from books to dance, art, music, audiovisual art, played a very strong role in the experience and in the lives of our citizens. Culture must be seen and was seen not just as sharing content, but also as active participation in the lives of cities. An active participation and a sharing of content that become available through the smartphones and tablets that people have, and this is particularly evident now. So this has helped making things universal, and especially in connection with the specific right that marks and that is typical of nations, in the sense that it doesn't belong to just one person, one country, one city, but then in concrete terms is to be enjoyed by citizens as a fundamental right, as in the Charter of Human Rights. Declaration of Human Rights. So it is this idea of going beyond the previous vision, this limited vision of culture, that we can imagine the city of the future, a city that is different, a city that is in actual, for practical purposes, is for everyone and open to everyone. And this document aims at identifying the necessary actions that are required by the city as a tool and almost as a vaccine against problems such as marginalization, social distress, violence, crime, racism, and also in the form of research as a way to fight against poverty. It is important to for Europe to start up again, and also for the world to do the same against the crisis caused by COVID-19. Despite its dramatic outcomes, it actually built a bridge among the various peoples and brought about a new form of humanism in which the human capital is placed at the center of the investments made by institutions. This reflection in this city is something that we started right from the beginning, also through our cultural offer. And I am thinking of this idea of exhibition spaces that belong to the community, that becomes a place of meeting, enjoyment, and open and inclusive debate and exchange, a museum, a cultural offer that is widespread all over the territory and that is a part of the daily lives of our citizens. And that, as it's been highlighted in the Charta, becomes a source of inspiration for growth and regeneration. And this administration, in this connection, carried out several initiatives, several projects, and also many policies were developed to ensure free admission to cultural spaces. But there is also another aspect that I think is important, and that's the democratic and social life with a direct bottom-up participation by citizens. So we have fought in order to change the statutes of Rome so that our citizens could participate and give their contribution in the common cause of the city, so that they could contribute directly to the planning of political life and its implementation. Participation in social and cultural life and consultation and inclusion of citizens are elements which are essential for equality and democracy. That is why today, more than ever, we need to invest, we think, in the digital participation by citizens, and so that this paves the way, and this has been shown very clearly, to the inclusion of people who up until today were marginalized or did not feel involved by a growth pathway addressing the needs of the local communities. So this means that we are granting democratic access, and this in practical terms means, for instance, access to quality education, school education, but also participation in political life. And we have seen how at this time of emergencies, schoolrooms were turned into virtual spaces, and this in practical terms made it possible also for those who were miles away to participate. Also, in particular, I'm referring to those who were sick and could not have participated in different ways, with physical presence. So the culture has to be at the root of a vision that looks to the city of the future. Another important element is that we promoted cultural policies that would allow people to reappropriate public spaces, but not limited to that. And for us, in particular, what was essential was the ability to create networks and alliances with the local areas, the territories, in order to promote the birth of a real urban cultural system that could make, over time, the actions promoted sustainable. And if I think of the physical city, what emerges is that, particularly in Rome, which is a city that has got so many historical resources, that, however, over time have limited the expression or the knowledge of contemporary culture, and particularly the construction of infrastructure. Well, we think that it is important to turn our living spaces, making them capable of facing the future, also because the pandemic has made us focus on planning for a generation. So we cannot simply go on with maintenance or making small interventions, but the time has come for us to make a quality leap. Passing from the city of the 19th century to the city of augmented reality, because this in practical terms also means to promote environmental issues, which is a planetary priority, and intervene on landscapes, considering the specificities of the places, different places, considering the ambitions that the various communities have. And by way of conclusion, I would like to say that it is important that in planning the smart cities of the future, we move on by adopting a cultural-based process that is rooted in the lives of those who actually live in the spaces of the city. And the more this is adapted to the form of that community and the urban space, the more this is going to be valuable in terms of results. Also for the purpose of the creation of new services that those who use them need to feel as their own and answering their requirements. So we are really proud to give life to such an important document that we hope may give a great contribution to cities in the years to come. And I cannot but thank the Deputy Mayor Luca Bergamo, because he has made this dream possible by granting an important role to the city of Rome as a lead partner and promoter of this initiative, but also as a generator of a relationship with other countries included in the network. And this is really and we believe that this is the result of the contribution given by all the cities that were on the forefront to give practical help and to participate. So I wish to thank all the team of the municipality and all those who have worked with great commitment and effort throughout this month to produce such an important document for the history of nations and cities. And in saying this, I would like to leave the floor to the next speakers that I'm going to be listening to with great interest, precisely to give the right space to these contributions in the work carried out by the municipality. Thank you.
Eleonora. Now I would like to welcome two very important voices. The first is Luigi Sacco from the OECD Centre of Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's really an honor to participate to this convening to launch a document like the Rome Charter that has, I think, lots to say in terms of how to reshape cultural policies for cities in the next few years. And I think that in particular, this emphasis on a capability approach is particularly welcome and necessary. Capabilities have been, of course, one of the must of development, economics and social policy for a long while. But as far as culture is concerned, the capability dimension so far has been a bit overlooked. So I think that it's particularly helpful to focus on the fact that without a capability building approach, a real change in many dimensions of cultural policy is not really possible. In particular, I think that one of the issues that come to mind when we consider how cultural rights are exercised in urban context has to do with the notion of participation. As we probably know, participation, of course, is a sort of password because it evokes democracy, inclusion, and so on. But the truth is that participation in itself is neither democratic nor inclusive. If you simply invite somebody to participate, this simply means that if they want to participate, they can. But the point is that most likely the people who will respond to a call for participation are the ones who are already prepared to participate. And in many cases, the people who are prepared to participate are the most entitled. So the people that, in a sense, would need the least. Not because they are not welcome, of course they are, everybody is. But the point is that the urge to participate should be particularly targeting the people who do not feel entitled to. So this aspect is of fundamental importance. The two other lines, complementary lines that are evoked in the Rome Charter are the notion of inclusion, which is already, of course, been discussed with the previous few words, and the notion of cultural democracy. So clearly, from what I just said, the triad between cultural democracy, capabilities, and inclusion is in some sense a coherent whole that is what motivates the approach of the Rome Charter. So, in the urban context, of course, there are a few challenges that I think connect very naturally to the main points, and in particular the 5 capability areas that are considered in the Rome Charter. But before going to this, it's important to stress a bit more why capabilities are so needed, and in particular how this relates to the understanding that we have of the various aspects of cultural experience. Well, the main point is that there is a sort of natural fallacy in understanding how and why culture is important to humans, which is this notion that culture is, in some sense, a sort of spontaneous, unconstrained activity that just happens, which, of course, in part is also true because it's part of human nature, of course, to express oneself. But the point is that, and it could not be otherwise, that culture is a learned ability to a large extent. And so, as far as this is true, it's clearly the case that capabilities mediate in a fundamental way our ability to learn how to, let's say, play culturally. First of all, so culture being a learned ability also means that, of course, its effects are largely mediated by the particular capacities that we have learned. So clearly this is linked to capabilities, although capabilities does something more. It's not simply learning to do something, but learning to do something in order to express and manifest ourselves in terms of our lifetime goals. And this is something more. It's not simply learning an ability, but learning an ability in an organized way to reach an existentially relevant goal. And so from this point of view, this clearly means that for many people, this journey is difficult today. It's not necessarily the case that, for example, the social context enables this capacity. And so simply inviting people to participate is frustrating from this point of view if you are not in the condition to do this properly. Okay? And in saying this, I'm not saying that we need any kind of benevolent paternalistic attitude. We really need people to explore these possibilities themselves. The point is making them aware they can explore and creating the conditions for them to explore, which is very different than telling them how to explore. The second point is that clearly developing capabilities requires effort. We tend to think that effort is something bad because in the end it would be so much better to achieve something without having to provide any effort. But what we are learning from the cognitive psychology research of the last few years is that although effort is certainly something that requires some self-discipline and self-control, effort is also extremely important for us to understand what is meaningful to us. And in particular, the fact that people provide effort also creates a perception of value around some types of actions. So the fact that we have to build this capacity through dedication, through constant application of our skills, it's something that also builds a perception of value. So from this point of view, the fact that culture is, let's say, demanding in terms of eliciting an action from people in order to achieve certain type of goals, or in particular to build certain types of activities, should not be seen as something bad. but really as a premise for the existential relevance that culture has for people. The third aspect is that to really create meaning, and this is an aspect on which the Charter really insists a lot, and rightfully so, we need to be able to navigate very complex corpora of content. And this is true even if you consider the most grassroots forms of culture you can imagine. So culture does not happen in a blank state. There is a very, very important capacity to position ourselves in this space and to decide how to navigate this space. And again, this requires capability. And furthermore, the very fact that many people are systematically denied the possibility to develop this potential, of course, needs that the emphasis of capability becomes of policy relevance, because removing barriers to do this is extremely important. If you do not characterize in a capability-oriented way the space of cultural policy, you simply don't see the problem. And finally, the point is that the more we familiarize with cultural mechanisms, the more we enable our cultural experience to become emotionally and cognitively transformative. After me, Daisy Fancourt will cover, for example, the complex and emerging relationship between culture, well-being, and health. And this is a case in which the mediation, of course, of our acquired abilities to experience culture, of course, have a clear impact on the capacity of cultural experiences to be, for example, transformative from the mental health point of view. So it's extremely important to insist on capabilities. And what are the areas that connect the capabilities that are singled out by the Rome Charter to the key urban problems of today? So enjoy, create, discover, protect, and share, not necessarily in this order, are areas that really and spontaneously connect to some of the key issues of today's urban agenda. Consider, for example, the aspect related to the enjoy capability. Enjoying culture is also enjoying the city, and this naturally leads to the issue of what Henri Lefebvre, one of the most important urban geographers of the last century, calls the right to the city. The capacity for communities to exercise their active role in the functioning of urban communities. And in particular, again, this means being enabled to do this. And this is particularly important in all these circumstances in which the public decision-making processes are not really including everybody, the points of view of everybody in deciding, for example, what is the best way to use, for example, public resources in the urban domain. From this point of view, so enjoying culture and enjoying the city are two sides of the same coin. And the fact that the right to the city has been so systematically overlooked, for example, in all the cases in which, for example, the recent experiences in creative cities development have apparently brought culture at the center of the urban agenda, but in practice they have done this in a very exclusionary way, just privileging the point of view of, let's say, the so-called creative class, or however we want to call it. This is clearly one point that needs further reflection. A second point is related to the create ability, is what we could call creative urban problem solving. Today, decision-making processes in the urban realm have to do with urban consultations. We simply ask people to express themselves. Again, who will speak? The ones who are entitled to speak already, the ones who know how the game works. But the point is exactly that there are so many voices that are not listened to or not even properly addressed. And from this point of view, how can we do it? Well, again, culture can give us incredibly important insights in this regard in terms of creative collective problem solving, unleashing collective intelligence. And of course, if this has to do with the create capability, this of course also has to do with certain dispositions that are so deeply ingrained in human nature, like, for example, playfulness. We are learning today to use playfulness to include everybody, because the language of play, the grammar of play, is something that is also a result of a gene culture coevolution in humans. And so, for example, it's not an illusion to consider possible future mechanisms of creative problem solving, which are exercised at a collective level in a truly inclusive way, using in a different capacity the social grammar of playfulness. And culture can be the way through which this can be exercised. And then, of course, if you consider the discovery capacity, the issue becomes the enabling public space. Public spaces are sometimes something that, is apparently a commons, is apparently something that is open to everybody, but not everybody is entitled to the same extent to public spaces. And especially not everybody feels entitled to the same extent to public spaces. So the point is, how do we make them enabling? For example, there has been an outpouring of art projects in the public space in the last decade at least. But many of these projects have often been, again, an exercise, almost authoritarian exercise of artistic subjectivity over a community that has been used as a canvas. We need exactly the other way around approach. We need an approach in which the creative process is really co-generated by the community itself from the community point of view. And this is something that is immensely more challenging, immensely more difficult, but also immensely more impactful. So enabling public spaces through the discover cultural capability is something that I think, again, gives us a great way forward in terms of future actions in the urban space. And referring to the protect capability, here the natural relationship is with the Faro Convention's heritage community notion. So we have outstanding examples, for example, in our European and not only European cities, of how heritage communities already exist. For example, I have been working for a long time, and still I'm so deeply linked to a city like Siena, where the system of contradas has been existing from centuries, and they are probably one of the closest historical illustration of the notion of heritage community that one can imagine, with the community museums that are literally curated by the community itself. So this idea of the heritage community as a form of protection that is not simply, preventing damage, but is creating a social organization that revolves around the shared heritage, is again something that is very, very important in terms of capability building. And finally, the share capability is clearly linked to the issue of cultivation of diversity and our capacity to really generate multicultural urban communities today. And this is really challenging our social abilities in a very deep sense. I don't have the time to elaborate on this, but many of our pro-social emotions are determined by social incentives that not necessarily favor intercultural dialogue. And nevertheless, culture can be extremely powerful in debunking the mechanisms that prevent our capacity to appreciate cultural diversity as a result of certain evolved social dispositions that we have. So what I'm saying is that what the Rome Charter really puts into focus is that some of the most urgent and burning issues in urban policies today could be tackled through a cultural strategy in ways that not necessarily are alone game changers, but that can contribute to a substantial extent to change the nature of the game and especially to overcome some of the biggest difficulties. This also means, and I'm quickly going to conclude, that in some sense we are entering also what we could call a different regime of cultural production, because taking this capability issue seriously really means turning upside down so many aspects of cultural policy and cultural production as we have understood it so far. And it's highly significant that this happens in a place like Rome, because Rome, by the way, has been the cradle of the most historically ingrained regime of cultural production, which is patronage, that historically is born at the transition between Republic and Imperial Rome. But patronage, as useful and beneficial it has been throughout the history of the West in the last couple of millennia, is also a very, very complex form of cultural production and participation in which co-optation is almost inevitable and essential. So, in a sense, we have to overcome some of the natural, features, characteristics of the patronage regime that have been implicitly and inadvertently today instrumental to preventing a truly inclusive approach to cultural participation and production. So it's highly symbolic that this is happening in Rome. And I think that we really have now to meditate carefully what are the implications of the Rome Charter, and especially how can we translate them into a meaningful new wave of cultural policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pier Luigi. I have a very quick question for you. You spoke about needing to make people aware of culture in order to enable them to participate and also, be able to share public spaces. But what kind of policy would a local council need to create in order to make people from poorer backgrounds aware? And these could be people who not only feel disconnected from their communities, but are also disconnected online. Maybe they don't have access to the type of technology that a lot of other people do. So what kind of meaningful policy would need to be created in order to encourage them to participate and make them aware of the culture of their home?
Thank you. It's a wonderful question. Clearly, the digital dimension is going to be very important in the future. But in a moment like this, you need to start from the physical space. Of course, this is particularly difficult in a pandemic time. And it's a challenge for, let's say, the short to medium term. But the point is that you have to go there and play, so to speak. So the point is really having occasions and situations in which you do not simply invite people, let's say, into the cultural institution like the museum or the library, but you really engage in the public space as a playground to involve and to motivate people to speak their mind. So from this point of view, I've seen, for example, that in the program of the Charter, there was also the experience through, if I remember well, Isolde Byrne, the Dublin City Council. What they have been doing, for example, in the last few years is exactly this, working in a very, very interesting way in engaging public spaces and in some sense creating this first occasion of interaction and interplay between different urban constituencies as a premise to, let's say, reinvent also the institutional space of the museum or the library, or something that becomes inclusive because in some sense the trust relationship has already been established outside the walls of the institution, and so the institution becomes welcoming as a consequence. The other way around is much more difficult and historically pretty ineffective.
Thank you. And just a question now from one of the people in our audience. How can we integrate underdeveloped and developing cities? Countries?
Well, we don't need to integrate them because the point is that many of the really meaningful cultural innovations of today are happening in the so-called underdeveloped cities today. The point is that we simply have to reestablish channels of communication. Today, Africa is much more innovative from the point of view of exploring, new ground in the cultural field that Europe is, just to make an example. So we don't need to integrate Africa. It's in the interest of everybody to really create new connections that enable us to understand what's going on there and gives them a space to really share, to use one of the capabilities, what's going on there. So the point is really, in some sense, debunking this, let's say, implicit colonialistic mentality that we still have, that what really happens is in Europe and in the US or North America, and all the rest is periphery. I mean, we have to wake up. The cultural geography of the world has changed completely. And in a sense, we are today much more the periphery than the center.
Exactly.
So it's extremely important to use the substantial economic and social resources that we have to acknowledge this new geography and to unleash all the potential that it entails.
Thank you very much. If you could please stay online, Pier Luigi, because we have another important speaker. Please welcome Daisy Fancourt, who is the Associate Professor of Psychobiology, Epidemiology at the University College of London. University College London, yes. Sorry, got that right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Daisy.
It's a pleasure to be speaking to you today. And I'm going to be talking to you about the Rome Charta, which I very much welcome as a fantastic new document. And I want to talk about the implications within this charter for public health and population health. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the work that's been done with the World Health Organization over the last few years in trying to prioritize and promote the importance of the arts for health. And then I want to come on to talk specifically about the Charter and about how the Charter integrates health and the implications that the Charter has for health within Rome and I think internationally. Now, when we talk about engaging with the arts, of course, the primary motivation for this amongst most people is for the joy and inspiration that the arts bring. But either inadvertently or unconsciously, the arts can also have profound effects on our health. We often think about this as the arts consisting of multiple different components of different active ingredients that can be good for health. So, for example, engaging with the arts involves the imagination. It activates the senses. It helps us to evoke emotions. It's cognitively stimulating. Often it involves some element of social interaction or physical activity. Now, these components have all been shown to be beneficial to health. And in fact, over the last year, I've worked with my research team and we've identified over 600 causal mechanisms that can link engagement with the arts with health outcomes. These can include psychological mechanisms such as things like coping, self-efficacy, and well-being and mental health benefits. They can include physiological mechanisms such as reducing stress hormones, improving immune function, helping to build physical strength. They can involve social mechanisms like reducing loneliness and isolation, enhancing social support and social cohesion. And behaviorally, the arts can also help to improve motivation, meaning that people are more likely to increase their behaviors related to health and adopt healthier lifestyles. All of these different mechanisms have then been shown to help to prevent different mental and physical illnesses or to help in their management and treatments. But there are two vital things here. The first of them is that whilst many different activities contain these different beneficial components, what the arts are very good at is combining multiple components together at once. And because most people engage in the arts for the joy of it, this actually means that there is an intrinsic motivation to do the arts, bringing these components along almost like a vehicle. And if we contrast this with health interventions, for example, often one of the barriers is around that motivational component. The second thing here is that the arts don't just work at an individual level. We've identified causal mechanisms that can work for yourself, such as going to cultural spaces or cultural activities, reducing loneliness. But also at a group level, doing those things can help to build group bonding. And if we have lots of these activities available within communities, we can really start to build group level social cohesion. So the arts can operate at multiple different levels simultaneously. So it was with this premise that with the World Health Organization, we started collaborating a few years ago, and we undertook a scoping review of the evidence of whether and if and how the arts can improve health and well-being. We looked very broadly at data from clinical trials, laboratory studies, different qualitative methodologies, and also from big data and epidemiological approaches. And in total, we found over 3,000 studies that we included within the report. These generally grouped into two categories. The first, looking at how the arts can help to prevent mental and physical illness and support health promotion. And the second, around how the arts can play a role in the management and treatment of different conditions. And I want to outline some of this evidence base to highlight the breadth and depth of impact the arts can have. Starting with prevention, the arts can play a role in supporting social determinants of health. For example, they can help to build social cohesion, and they can also, if carefully applied, help to reduce social inequalities. This is an important point, as I welcome Luigi's comments here about the fact that the arts can often be something that is used most by the privileged. But actually what we found is that in recent research, people from most deprived communities often have disproportionately larger responses to arts engagement. So in other words, the arts can help to reduce inequalities if we can find a way of engaging everybody equally. And of course, I'm going to return to this when talking about the Charter. The arts can also support in child development, helping mother-infant bonding, speech and language developments, and playing a role in educational attainment. The arts can support caregiving, helping people to understand health from different perspectives. The arts in medical training programs have been shown to improve the clinical skills of doctors and nurses, and they can also improve staff well-being, a really important thing at the moment when we're facing a health crisis globally, with many staff facing burnout. The arts can also play a role in the prevention of ill health, helping to improve well-being, helping to reduce the risk that somebody develops depression or anxiety, playing a role in the maintenance of good cognition as people age, and also in good physical function, like helping to reduce the incidence and trajectories of frailty. And there's even literature on all of these effects adding together to show associations with a lower risk of premature mortality. And the arts can also support health-promoting behaviours, including playing important roles in health communication and the way that we discuss illnesses between different cultures, helping to reduce health-related stigma, and sometimes being able to play a role in reaching hard-to-reach groups. In terms of management and treatment, the arts have been shown to play an important role in reducing symptoms of perinatal mental illness amongst mothers, as well as helping to manage and reduce the symptoms of other types of mental illness. The arts have been shown in clinical settings to play very important roles, often in stress and anxiety management, for example, in premature infants, people undergoing surgery or invasive procedures, and people in intensive care. And this has been shown through psychological anxiety and biological markers of anxiety as well. The arts have been shown to play very important roles for people who have developmental and neurological disorders, for example, helping in communication and helping people to be able to socialize, to be able to experience emotionally, and to be able to identify the symptoms they're experiencing and communicate these better. The arts also have an important role to play in the mental health and well-being of people with non-communicable diseases. Again, we see important research here about things like the management of illness and adherence to treatment regimes being improved amongst people who have access to the arts. And finally, the arts have for a long time played an important role in palliative care and bereavement as expressions of grief and helping people to manage their emotions. So this shows the strength and depth and breadth of the literature that we're seeing on the importance of the arts in health. Within the report, we therefore make some recommendations, one of which is to acknowledge this growing evidence base, supporting the implementation of new interventions, sharing effective practice, and supporting research that will help us to understand more about how the arts affect health. We also talk about recognizing the added health value of the arts. So the fact that the arts can almost be an in-kind resource for health if we have more cultural activities for people that can help to improve well-being and maintain good health, this can reduce the load on health services. We also encourage arts and cultural organisations to make health a part of their strategies and to actively promote the public awareness of the benefits of engaging in the arts. And we also highlight the importance of cross-sectoral research that will help to build bridges between the arts and cultural sectors and the health sectors. And we're seeing in many countries now programs like social prescribing that actually refer patients through to engaging in the arts to improve their health and well-being. So alongside this report, we've also been looking at the policy implications of this. And this is where I want to start considering what we're seeing within the Rome Charter and also other charters that have come out recently. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals that the World Health Organization has set, we can see that the arts can help to achieve multiple different goals. For example, helping to promote well-being at different ages, helping to ensure and promote lifelong learning for people. We highlight in the reports how the arts can help in raising awareness of issues around gender equality and the fact that the arts often as a sector provide many employment opportunities for women. The fact that the arts can play an important role in economic growth and how, when applied carefully, they can help to reduce inequality. And finally, we highlight that the arts can help to build inclusive societies. Why the arts, of course, we might ask? Well, the arts can provide solutions for challenges where we don't currently have solutions. They're often cost-effective activities to promote for people because they can have so many benefits. I've just spoken specifically about health here, but we see benefits across other domains as well, for example, education. When we look at the priorities of Health 2020, they're about catalysing action from other sectors and helping to build resilient communities. And of course, these are themes that are echoed within the Rome Charter itself, this importance of community. We also looked at the World Health Organization's General Programme of Work, which focuses on increasing human capital and helping to accelerate action on mental health. And also at a time where we're facing challenges in resources, drawing on other sectors to support health and well-being feels more important than ever. So this brings me to the Rome Charter. I particularly welcome in the Charter the reference to Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the idea that we need to protect everybody's right to participate in cultural life in the community and enjoy the arts. And this is, again, I think, the stress on everyone's right and the importance of addressing inequalities in participation. And I think what we really see from the Charter is how to implement this to improve lives. So I thought I would end by talking about the 5 different messages within the Charter and just mentioning about the relevance that these have specifically to health and why this Charter helps to flag the importance of health and well-being. There is a focus on discovering cultural roots and recognising heritage, identity and place. These are fundamental social determinants of health as well. If we can help people to discover their cultural roots and recognise their own identity, then these are things that we know help to improve health. In other words, we achieve 2 goals in one. Creating cultural expressions is not just important culturally, but it's also a form of health behaviour. Sharing cultures and creativity can help to support social cohesion and social support, both fundamental activities in trying to promote healthy societies. Enjoying cultural resources and spaces can provide benefits to mental and physical health, helping to reduce sedentary behaviours, get people into the communities more, connecting with others. And protecting our common cultural resources is vital to support the sustainability of culture. If we don't protect our culture moving forwards, it's likely not just to adversely affect culture, but also to adversely affect health and well-being. So I'm so delighted to see these priorities within the Charter because I feel that they will benefit both the cultural sector and also benefit population health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daisy. It's good to see my home city in the background there as well on a sunny day, unusual. A really important topic that you've addressed there, and obviously mental health is really being put into the test everywhere by the pandemic. And I just wondered, obviously the pandemic has caused, the closure of cinemas, theatres, etc. But one of the easiest ways for people of all backgrounds to access culture is through libraries. And when I was home in the UK in August, obviously libraries were closed. So in that respect, what do you think local councils can do, to enable such resources that are accessible, that are free, to remain open? Obviously it's been a big challenge for years. But libraries, to me, seems like the simplest way that everyone can access culture.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's important with the pandemic to differentiate in that the pandemic has closed cultural venues, but arts themselves have actually flourished during the pandemic. If we look to Italy, for example, we had those viral videos of people singing from their balconies whilst they were in lockdown. And I think this really highlights how important the arts are. At a time of global health crisis, you might have expected things like the arts to disappear as unessential things, but that's not at all what happens. And we've seen this time and time again in global disasters over the centuries. In times of crisis, people turn to the arts more than ever. And we've actually seen an outpouring of online and digital arts experiences, people using the arts to connect, to support their mental health. And I think this is a really important thing to recognize, that many people have been using the arts to cope at this very difficult time. So in terms of moving forward with public spaces, I feel that it's really important that these don't get forgotten in the reopening of society. I worry that they'll be seen as the non-essential leisure activities that can wait. And actually it's the opposite. I think these are activities that should be opened as a priority, because they will help with coping, they will help with social cohesion, when we're actually starting to see more and more social fragmentation now as the pandemic continues, which is dangerous for public health. And they will also play a role in maintenance of people's employment. So I think we have to really think about these as important things that we should be looking to reopen. Of course, many of these venues are actually very conducive to social distancing. Things like libraries and theatres, it's actually possible to maintain that distance quite effectively. And also we have options with outdoor venues as well. So I welcome the digital activities that arts organisations have been providing, but I recognise the digital poverty and digital divide that we spoke about earlier in this session this morning. So I really encourage that communities look to open their cultural venues as soon as they can safely.
Thank you very much. And a question from our audience. How can we give people more space to be an active agent in cultural life and not just a consumer of culture?
That's a very important question. I think one of the things that we can do is to ensure diversity, so that we are promoting lots of different types of culture that really speak to people's own individual backgrounds, but also that we make sure that we allow culture to be developed not just by professionals, but by individuals, so that culture becomes something that everybody can produce, rather than something that people have to be invited to take part in. And I think a lot of this involves making access to culture very open from a young age, for example, in schools, so that we have the idea that this is a natural part of everyone's experiences. And also that we try and make activities wherever possible affordable or cost neutral or free, so that there is no financial barrier to people taking part. So that really highlights the importance of national and state investment into the arts, to recognise the so many benefits that it brings.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I would like to introduce Cesare Pietrausti, who's the president of Pier Expo in Rome, an exhibition company. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to start from the logo. Avevamo detto che parlavo in italiano.
Okay.
Well, I said I was going to speak in Italian, if you don't mind. I would like to start from the logo of the Charter of Rome, the C, that of course reminds us of a circle. So I would like to focus on the Italian word circle, cerchio, which as an origin is linked to the notion of research. So looking for something, doing research has to do with a circular movement. So what's the difference between a circular and a linear movement? Well, a linear movement is trying to grasp the object that you are looking for example, a content. A circular movement allows us to look at that same object, but without grasping it, without picking it up, but looking at it from different viewpoints. The logo is, of course, a metaphor of the sense of the Charter of Rome and this initiative. Well, in this logo, the different viewpoints are epitomized by the different colors. So the circular movement allows us to look at the same thing in different colors. So from different viewpoints, basically. This possibility of looking at the same thing with different perspectives is fundamental. That's why I'm talking about it. And it is deeply liberating because it gives us the opportunity to discover, hence discovery, the first point of the Charter of Rome. So to discover within ourselves the coexistence of different potential approaches. Well, this discovery is an inner discovery. It's liberating, as I said, because it liberates us. It frees us from the cage of identities and ideologies. So it frees us from the cage of convictions that have been forced upon us, that we are forced to recognize and to acknowledge and to take up as our roles within the social context. Well, this possibility of looking at things from different viewpoints is the main driver for the recognition of the other. As a guest that is hosted in our thinking, in our emotions, and it is de facto the starting point of what we call love. So love is what allows us to look at things through the eyes of our beloved, as if they were our own eyes. This was just a preliminary remark to say that this possibility of looking at things from different viewpoints is liberating and is the starting point of this charter, is the first point of this charter that is to discover, so discovery. So we can be something more, something different than ourselves, simply. So we can get out of our delusions of identities and ideologies. We can abandon the idea that owning a knowledge means grasping it. It means taking it in terms of possession. So getting rid of the idea of possession is a main point here, because looking at the object of our knowledge from different viewpoints is way more liberating. I won't say satisfying, but it definitely gives you a feeling of freedom. That's my preliminary remark. I'm an artist. Even if I'm here in a different capacity because of the will of an unusual politician that is our deputy mayor, but I'm supporting artistic life and artistic research. Well, I think that artistic research, unlike other professions and other approaches to knowledge, has different characteristics and features, and I would like to stress three in particular. First of all, to give meaning, to give a deep meaning in terms of a meaning for life to events and to behaviors that are like ordinary habits. For example, eating. I won't elaborate on this because maybe the next speaker will do that, but attach meaning to common and obvious behaviors. And secondly, to attach meaning to failure and to pain. Artists can, and I'm not saying that, of course, they are not feeling any pain or are not suffering from failure, but they can truly attach meaning to both of them. They become objects of matter for artistic creation. The third point, sorry for all these bullets, but I realize it's a pretty broad topic and it's difficult to elaborate on it in such a short time, is to create interdisciplinary areas, which is symbolized metaphorically in the overlapping colors in our logo, in that C. Well, those are areas overlapping across different identities, for example, different professional identities. Artists and artistic research can bring different professionalities together, so they can operate on the margins, being creative, being innovative with respect to the fixed rules of the different disciplines and subjects. So those areas are facilitated by the work of artists, that through cooperation, through forms of sharing, start working on those margins. I realize that my time is almost up, but the main focus of my contribution is that of giving a flavor of how the Charter of Rome, as one of our speakers said on the first day, is not a law, but it's an instrument for work. That's what we would like to do, because Pala Expo is an exhibition center which also organizes training activities and promotes performing arts. It also manages this museum that is hosting us today. So it is promoting activities outside its spaces. And the next speakers are going to talk about the orchestras of transformation are here under the auspices of Pala Expo, and they will be much better than yours truly to talk about this. But what I would like to say, and I don't want to sound too proud, but the whole activity of Pala Expo in contemporary art is oriented to present art, artistic research, cultural research, the encounter among different disciplines, or the combination between the humanistic and the scientific approach as a vital instrument for our towns, for our cities, and for our communities. We acknowledge that as something we have been trying to do, good or bad, we don't know, but we're doing it anyway. But what we can do from now onwards, and we have started already, is to support, is to reinforce a network which is an international network, albeit organizations that are part of our city, so foreign academies, cultural institutes from other countries, and there are so many in Rome. We already started. There's a person, Paul Sellers, that's the former director of the British Council, who's currently working for us to create a network of all these international organizations that make up our city. So there's a database, there's a shared calendar, there are common objectives, there are collaborative projects. So the idea is that of attaching contents to the activities of this network. And these contents have to do with the development of the themes that are set out in the Charter of Rome. Here, by hosting scholars, scientists, artists from the international sphere, all that are represented institutionally, but also through the participation of other cities that maybe are not part of the UCLG network or the Rome Charter network. So we would like to put forward this proposal, so to share this international network abroad through the same contents that are contents among institutions and organizations as well. Sorry for cutting long story short. Thank you.
And now we welcome back onto the screen the curators of the Orchestras of Transformation project. And they are Judith Weilander, Matteo Lucchetti, Sara Alberani, Valerio Di Balivo. I think that's it. They're all here. Thank you and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for this invitation, first of all. And after the introduction of yesterday, we would like to get into the details of our project that we titled Orchestras of Transformation, Orchestre della Trasformazione in Italian. We're speaking in English because we are involving international artists, so I think that's appropriate. So we started between us with a question. We asked ourselves if we could think about the urgent issues of our times, but through the perspectives and agendas of those communities that are usually excluded from main platforms of visibility or decision-making processes. The margins, I guess, that Cesare was speaking about before. And these three large-scale events that we are planning for late spring 2021 try to orchestrate the energies of the city as a dialogue between these specific communities and the interventions of three major international artists that come to Rome as activators of processes that have dedicated their whole artistic practice to the urgencies of our times, such as gender equality for Jasmine Pateja, sustainable food production in times of global warming for cooking sections, or the creation of inclusive and pluriversal spaces for future societies with Marinella Senatore's practice. These three public moments will take the form of performative and discursive formats to bring translocal, socially engaged art in dialogue with places linked to the social, political, and community life of the city of Rome. We chose these places, we are choosing these places as the places that are meaningful to Rome and that are not accessible many times today. And they're linked to foundational stories and events of the past and recent history of the city. We think that we can repurpose their function, we can repurpose their image through the dialogues between the invited artists and the local actors to create compelling, symbolic, and we hope mediatic moments that propose alternative imageries and contribute to rethinking cultural inclusion as a political engine for social transformation through art. We want to thank the commissioners of the project, the 2020 Rome Charter, of course, Comune di Roma, and Pala Expo, of course. And also the partners, ASVIS, that is the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, as you all know very well, and the SDG Action Campaign. Please, Judith.
We conceived Orchestras of Transformation as a pilot project of city curating for the city of Rome that in the future could be developed in dialogue with many other cities. With this initiative, we want to give space to artistic long-term commitments that link art institutions to communities and their transformative imaginaries, embedding art into life and processes of engagement, activation, and responsibility. A reference for our methodology is the New York City's Public Artist in Residency project, launched by the Department of Cultural Affairs by the Mayor de Blasio in 2015. It is a municipal artist residency program that hosts artists in the city government to propose and implement creative solutions to pressing civic challenges. For example, the Cuban artist Tania Bruguera has started to work with the Migrants Office in 2017 on how immigrant communities can trust the government and how, in turn, will the government demonstrate that it trusts immigrant communities. For our first intervention, we have invited the artist Jasmine Pateja, founder and director since 2003 of the artistic project Blank Noise, committed to ending sexual and gender-based violence in India. We commissioned to her an event in the form of a summit of feminist, trans, and LGBTQ+ associations in Rome. The gathering could involve symbolic places such as Palazzo Nardini, a historic seat of feminist associations, or San Gregorio Park at Celio, a complex and conflicting area with various episodes of aggression due to neglect and abandonment. The summit will revolve around issues surrounding gender-based violence and will conclude with a happening inspired by the Indian artist's work, Me to Sleep. During the event, hundreds of bodies will occupy the open spaces around the summit to sleep together, demonstrating the need to be able to experience the public spaces of a city free from harassment and violence. Another pivotal work by Pateja is I Never Asked for It, a nomadic temporary museum that could take the shape of a procession through the streets where participants show and wear the clothes the victims wore at the time of the harassment or violence suffered. Please launch the video statement by Jasmine Pateja that she prepared for us.
And I am an artist based in Bangalore, India. I work to end violence against women, girls, and all persons. The right to imagine is fundamental in enabling social change. The artist works with varying social contexts, communities, and publics, and problem solves by building methodologies and processes towards creating a collective imagination. Collective imagination enables collective action, and this is where social change resides. We have been building projects to end violence against women, to confront fear and victim blame in India. Projects that enable translocal networks have the power to speak a deeply local and universal truth, to build solidarity, and to become a stronger force in making social change. Thank you.
So for the second intervention, we invited the British collective Cooking Sections that will introduce their long-term project Climavore, that is based on the fundamental question, how do we as humans change climates? Climate recognizes that new seasons are emerging, and the lines between spring, summer, autumn, and winter are increasingly blurred, while periods of polluted oceans, soil exhaustions, subsidence, pandemics, as we all know, and droughts are becoming more and more prevalent. Climavore on tidal zones, one specific chapter of their research, and is the one that we also invited in Rome in some way, explores the environmental impact of intensive salmon aquaculture and reacts to the changing shores of the Isle of Skye, where all the salmon farming is taking place in the north of Scotland. So they will come to Rome, and hopefully already in November, after the opening of their big solo show at Tate, they will come here to start seeking a dialogue with FAO, that you all know the United Nations agency that is in Rome. And we hope that by bringing the duo's experience on the relationship between food production and global warming within this agency of the United Nations, the project will try to problematize its current and future role in times of a climate crisis. The outcome of the final event could involve other Roman buildings, as we mentioned before, that were historically linked to the distribution and consumption of food through history. One area that we are very interested in, for instance, just to give you some insight on our project, is the archaeological area of Monte dei Cocci, a hill made of about 53 million olive oil broken amphorae, that illustrates the enormous demand for oil of Imperial Rome, which was at the time the world's largest city with a population of at least 1 million people. So try to learn from that past and to bring it back to the current present. And now let's see a statement by Cooking Sections.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Alon Schwabe.
And I'm Daniel Fernandez Pascual.
And together we practice as Cooking Sections.
We started Cooking Sections in 2013 to use food as a tool to understand landscape and ecologies within the visual arts, but also focusing on the new challenges of the climate emergency and how we could address food infrastructure through different forms of intervention.
Our platform and research, Climavore, questions how we eat as humans are changing the climate. And through that, we develop various projects and long-term interventions that bring together policymakers, artists, citizens, and various community and environmental groups to basically think how we transform the way we eat and the spaces we use across the globe.
And those transitions might take a long time, and that's where we like to engage with long-term processes that go perhaps beyond a 4 or 8 year period, and much rather engage with 20 years or 30 years transitions. And the challenge is, how do we propose new alternatives, new discussion platforms, and new ways to engage with the current challenges?
Thank you to Cooking Section. And last but not least, the third project is developed by Italian artist Marinella Senatore for the fascist district of Eur in Rome, that will become the setting for a new public intervention by the artist dedicated to the celebration of a pluriversal and inclusive society, mainly done in collaboration with Afro-descendant, migrant, and second-generation communities of Italian artists. The streets of the neighborhood were loved by many Italian filmmakers like Antonioni and Fellini, and will be reimagined and reused as really a white projection screen to imagine a multiplicity of narratives, cultures, music, and other artistic expressions that represent a contemporary globalized society in opposition to the nationalism and the imperialism that is expressed by that architecture in the city of Rome.
And we thank you for your attention. We are looking forward to welcome you for the event Orchestra of Transformation that will take place in May, June in Rome, 2021. Hopefully we will all join together for this event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cesare.
Grazie a te.
And now we welcome to the stage Luca Bergamo, who's the Deputy Mayor of Rome.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm with you. I think we are with friends, colleagues from Izmir, Barcelona,
From Izmir,
and Rabat.
yes. Donc, soyez.
Yeah.
Bonjour, Izmir. Bonjour, bienvenue.
I think
The mayor of Izmir.
Yeah.
I greet the city of Rome and conference party,
Saluto la città.
one of the most significant port cities of the Mediterranean. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to address something that is extremely close to my heart. The cultural heritage, the cultural diversity of our cities shape the future development and the meaning of our lives. I found the Rome Charter exciting because it focuses on the right of cultural realization of city dwellers from different cultural origins. It underlined the equal right to participate in cultural life for everyone, as leaders and administrators of the cities. We must adopt this Charter's principles in our city's policies. To this end, the UCLG Culture Summit is a very significant meeting. With this belief, we will hold the 2021 Summit in Izmir on September. At the UCLG Summit in Izmir, we will have the opportunity further develop the democratic cultural policy expressed in the Rome Charter. Another important topic that we want to touch in the Izmir Summit will be the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic in the field of culture and the solutions. The summit will offer the opportunity to discuss cultural heritage with tourism and creative economies, where the impact of the pandemic is heavily felt. Gender and culture and cultural aspirations of the future generations will also be among the topics of the UCLG Izmir Summit. We will also exchange on the relations between culture and sustainable development goals, especially culture and the environment. We are approaching the 40th anniversary of Mondial Cult, which took place in 1982 and marked a turning point in humanity's approach to culture. I want to express that in the UCLG Izmir Summit, we will underline the accumulations of Mondial Cult's approach. I invite you to Izmir Culture Summit in 2021, where we will assess global developments in the field of culture and develop policies and strategies for the future.
Thank you. Now we welcome Joan Subirats, the Deputy Mayor of Barcelona.
Hello, John.
Good morning.
Ciao.
Buongiorno.
Ciao.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning. Good morning, you all. Good morning, Rome. I'm very glad to be here on this occasion to talk about this Rome Charter, which I believe is a great initiative, especially right now, where there's a radical uncertainty about what's ahead of us. So, showing the strength, the perspectives that culture has in such a situation of uncertainty is something very important to me. In Barcelona, we have been working very hard to make sure that culture becomes a key element of the democratic structure of our city. The 20th century was a century where the right to education has been key for democratization, and we believe that in such a time of uncertainty, with the many doubts we have about the future, culture can give us a vital meaning, can explain us what we must do when faced with environmental challenges, etc. It gives us a meaning of the strength of humanism. It's true that there are very important challenges to address, like inequalities, and the right to health, the right to education have been very important in the 20th century to counter such inequalities. But it is also true that if, from the viewpoint of education, the level in Europe, the level of equality in Europe has improved, it is also true that the cultural heritage we all have, the cultural baggage we have, is very different from one another. And this was explained by Pier and by others. So what really distinguishes people is not so much the educational level, which is very important, but also the sense of exploring reality, of being able to accept diversity, to introduce innovation in thinking. And these elements are so important right now, where we have lots of uncertainties, lots of doubts about the future. So the cultural baggage we have is very important. The cultural heritage we have is very important. That's why I believe that the constraints between the connections between culture and education, culture and community are key right now. We must also think about the limits of technological change, of artificial intelligence, the new technological challenges we have to rise up to, also in terms of health, what's happening with life, the relationship between progress and environmental protection. And culture is giving us this vital meaning, which I believe is very important. I won't talk at length. Well, it's true that the challenges posed by COVID-19 make us think of resilience, so to keep doing things as we have been doing them so far, or it is making us consider more radical opportunities for change. And culture can show some important elements in this regard, because it makes us talk about the vital meaning, which is the most important here. Well, I believe that the Rome Charter is offering us this scenario to rethink about things, to explore new scenarios for sustainable progress. Because at the end of the day, it's not only a problem of culture, it is a democratic challenge that we have ahead of us. Here in Barcelona, we have been organizing this exhibition on thinking to talk about the future, especially the future of our city, a city that is a great space of serendipity, of innovation. But we also have to consider if the city has to be rethought. So long live the Rome Charter, long live our collaboration. Thank you.
Sami Kanan, the Mayor of Geneva, a city committed to human rights, which is speaking with Rome about the Charter.
Bonjour à toutes et tous. J'aimerais tout d'abord saluer ma...
Good morning, you all. First of all, I would like to greet the Deputy Mayor Luca Bergamo, the Mayor of Rome, and the Secretary General of UCLG Emilia Sites. I also would like to thank you for organizing this conference on this topic. You know that the city of Geneva is known for the promotion of humanitarian rights, and on the occasion of the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights, and to reinforce the importance of cultural heritage for such rights, the city of Geneva has twinned with other towns, other cities that were directly interested due to the destruction of their heritage. So in 2018, the city of Geneva has launched the Geneva Declaration, Human Rights and Cultural Heritage, the commitment of cities on solidarity, along with the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Human Rights, and the city of Mosul, Strasbourg, Timbuktu, and Vienna. This document is laying stress on the protection of cultural heritage as an indispensable element for the protection of human rights, in particular cultural rights, social cohesion, peace, and sustainable development. Since then, other cities like Bern, Hanover, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Saint-Denis have joined. 20 municipal governments have answered this appeal, and others are interested to do that. This declaration seemed very important because the Convention of the UNESCO Global Heritage is committing only countries to protect cultural heritage, whereas actually cultural heritage is often located in towns and cities, and this heritage cannot be decoupled from the cultural rights that on their turn are human rights. So the Declaration of Geneva is defending the role of towns and cities for the protection of human rights and cultural heritage. And cities are undertaking to develop and maintain cities and territories that can make people and their rights be the center of policy making, to encourage the creation of open and dynamic communities, and to better recognize the role of heritage to rehabilitate and regenerate this heritage, to encourage creativity and to adopt policies and ambitions, and to adopt a culture of exchange among cities. So the enhancement of our territory is a challenge of urbanization. It is the main driver for sustainable cities that are in harmony with their environment and are conceived truly for their inhabitants. Taking into account the commitment of the City of Geneva, the Charter of Rome on cultural rights developed by the ad hoc commission of UCLG and the municipal government of Rome is in tune with the values we are protecting, and that will allow us to deeply elaborate this reflection on a global and local level. I therefore encourage the towns that haven't done it yet to have a look at the Declaration of Geneva and to sign it, human rights and cultural heritage, the commitment of cities based on solidarity. I wish you all the best for your conference.
And now we welcome Mohammed Sadiki, who's the mayor of Rabat, one of the most important capitals of culture in Africa. Bienvenue.
Merci, madame.
Thank you very much, and good morning, you all. It is a great honor for me to attend this conference and to participate in this event on the Rome Charter. This is a very important document based on the rights of local and regional governments to foster participation in the cultural life. This charter has been joined by 30 cities in tune with our orientation, with our political vision and our actions in the field of cultural development. And it is the glue keeping together the wishes of decision makers at a global level, and that will allow them to make them come true. Local governments have a key role to play in the promotion of culture And our charter has been conceived to create inclusive cities where citizens can exercise their rights to democracy, to culture, in a structured and long-lasting as well as sustainable environment. So a city that can make the concept of democratized culture clear and concrete, just like any other local governments. The municipal government of Rabat is a protagonist of actions at a local level and is undertaking to guarantee decentralization. Well, in this regard, it aims to develop its territory, to take actions that can give new momentum to the cultural development, taking into account their potentialities. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that the city of Rabat has a particular leadership that makes it stand out at international and national level, considering the cultural heritage that characterizes it and has characterized it over the years and over the centuries. As an historical capital, an imperial capital of international stature, as an open city, as a sustainable place, which has been declared heritage, World Heritage of UNESCO in 2012 and Capital of Culture, while Rabat is experiencing a very important movement of urban regeneration. Several projects have been launched within the framework of bilateral and multilateral partnerships. That have made it acquire this footprint of cultural town par excellence. The capital, Rabat, is also welcoming a considerable number of patrimonial sites. For example, the Moazine Festival, the International Festival of the International Film Festival, and the Festival of the Mediterranean, the Jazz Festival, and so on and so forth. Moreover, Rabat is the Moroccan capital of culture. Has become a global metropolis and has become well known internationally to draw attention to its beauties. We've got several museums, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Archaeological Museum, etc. Thanks to this vocation, Rabat has been hosting important universities and higher institutes in Morocco, the highest School for Administration, the National School for Architecture and Engineering, and other schools. In this framework, several local actions have been taken that correspond perfectly to what the Agenda 2030 says. All these actions we're taking in partnership with other countries. The Czech Republic, the City of Paris, Seville, and now we are renewing our relationships with Madrid. Well, these partnerships have allowed us to have faster cultural exchange, to make them more dynamic, and to actively contribute to the development of cultural activities. We've got a piece of legislation that recognizes the role of coordinator among different actors to the city of Rabat. development agencies, universities, etc., civil society. These protagonists are invited to work together in synergy to contribute to the cultural development locally in order to promote projects under the auspices of the municipal government. I would like to conclude by taking the opportunity offered by this virtual platform to launch an appeal so that we can contribute all together to the development of our cooperation and to launch a sustainable and multidimensional cultural development. I wish you all the best, and I'm choosing this very important topic. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, Eleonora.
Now, as we approach the end of these intense 3 days, we welcome back Luca Bergamo, the Deputy Mayor of Rome. As well as on the screen, we have François Matarasso and Jordi Pasquale.
I wonder if you see me there. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Who's to start? I think it's Jordan.
Yeah, well, a question to François in regarding the first day, human rights and human capabilities. What questions, were aroused for you during these 3 days?
Thank you very much. It's been a remarkable 3 days, just because, and maybe because of the hybrid nature of the conference, we have been able to really have a global participation. And that I've found very moving and very important. I would like to just say a word or two about the capabilities, which were so well evoked by Luigi Sacco this morning. The capabilities in the Rome Charter are the critical originality, if we can go so far as to say that, to make the connection between the capabilities approach and culture, which I think has not yet been done before. During the drafting process, the discussion, but also during the discussions of the conference, a lot of other ideas have been suggested, and they're all valid and important. So people have spoken about tolerance, acceptance, the importance of universities, the place of indigenous people, cultural diversity, and so on. And one of the things that we have always said is that the Charter is interpretable in the sense of how you act upon it in local circumstances is a matter for local interpretation. And some of those additional words or concepts or themes are maybe very valid and important in a particular context. But I want to make a distinction between those ideas, some of which correspond more to values or commitments, and the capabilities, the 5 capabilities in the Charter. The capabilities, as Pierluigi explained so well, are empowering concepts. They are words, they are actionable, they're all verbs. They are things that I think, I believe that most of us would want to be able to do in relation to our cultural life. And that is maybe one of the differences between the Charter of Rome and much of contemporary cultural policy. This is not about actions for cities. The actions for cities are implicit in the capabilities. The actions are for inhabitants. And the challenge for cities is to ask themselves, how do we make sure that inhabitants are able to act in these ways? How they do that is for the citizens themselves to decide. And I just want to finish by drawing attention to a second element of the Charter, which has been published only recently for the conference. So when the Charter was originally published back in June, it simply included the Charter and the reason why. There is now several further pages which have the heading working with the Rome Charter. And they suggest some of the ways in which cities might consider taking action. They are in relation to each of the capabilities. They are only bullet points, and they are, one could have gone on for pages adding to the range of possibilities. But I hope that the Charter will both empower cities and municipalities to consider, to rethink how they think about cultural policy, and also to empower local people to act in ways that seem important to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pasquale, what have you learned over the last few days?
Well, we have learned many, many things. We have learned that when the right to participate fully and freely in cultural life is promoted, then all actors involved in this process need to identify obstacles and guarantee that inequalities are well analyzed. When we use a rights-based approach in cultural policies, then obstacles and inequalities emerge as key considerations, and we see them as clear foundations of policies. In these 3 days, we have learned from cities and places all around the world that are working on how to identify obstacles and how to explicitly consider inequalities. A few examples come. Obstacles and inequalities in children and youth. We have learned from Mexico City, Medellin, Ramallah, Makati, Santa Fe. Race. We have learned from Washington, D.C. Women. We have learned from Malmö and Montevideo. Indigenous peoples. We have learned from La Paz and Abitibi-Temiskaming. The rural-urban divide. We have learned from Ouagadougou and Concepcion. The colonial heritage. We have learned from Ouida. The digital divide. We have learned from Lisbon, Buenos Aires, Bilbao, Xi'an, Cebu, San Jose de Costa Rica, or Kazan. And then the obstacles that happen in almost all cities, those related to place, class, or education. Dublin, Chiang Mai, Lyon, Barcelona, Johannesburg, Bogota, and Geneva. And the pandemic of COVID-19 has also shown that inequalities exist in the protection of cultural workers when we relate those conditions to the conditions of other professionals. And we have also learned the need that cultural institutions, organizations, policies reconquer the public spaces so that they become places of cultural participation of all. And we have learned a lot from our keynote speakers, coming from activism, university, networking. They have given in-depth focus on inequalities. Farida Shahid, Karima Ben Noun, we will listen to her in a few minutes. Patrice Meyerbisch, Joan Bouchard, Yvonne Donders, Tere Badia, Antonio Spadaro, Edgar Pieterse, and of course the keynote speakers today, outstanding messages from Pier Sacco and Daisy Fancourt. And let me also express special gratitude to the mayors of Rabat, Izmir, and Geneva, and to Vice Mayor of Barcelona for their speeches this morning. And let me conclude the learnings, and you see there are many, highlighting the examples from Rome. The speech of the director of Pala Expo and the examples of the Orchestras of Transformation illustrate very well the commitment, and also, please let me express our gratitude and the learnings from the wise leadership undertaken by the municipality of Rome Capitale, all the team, and especially Luca Bergamo. Grazie.
Grazie.
To me?
Luca, sì.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parliamo in inglese o
Italiano?
Let's
say English, yeah.
In English.
It's fine.
So as a deputy mayor of one of the most beautiful and culturally intense cities in the world, what have you learned over the last few days?
Many. First, I would acknowledge the two people you're watching on your screens now, together a third one that is behind the desk there, that is Carla Schiavone, are those that actually, with me, wrote the Charter, physically wrote the Charter, and has been drafting the meaning that it took the responsibility together with Eleonora Guadagno that you heard in the morning. That took responsibility of being the Senate drafting committee. And all of them, even more than me, we owe gratitude, because if we have been able to speak and to learn, it's because the work that's been done by them with over 45 cities, 50 networks, and now hundreds of experts, brought to light something that I think Luigi Sacco very clearly illustrated today as well. So, and something that as well the mayor of Bilbao mentioned the first day, saying, he said, and I was somehow struck by, he said, I think there will be a before and the after the Charter. I don't know if that is true or it is not. Anyway, the feeling I had these days is that actually the wider community, that is those that worked and those that are working now, because as everybody said, this is the opening of the process. It's actually switching something. And the something, it goes beyond the cultural policy, goes directly in the sphere of urban policy at large. And that, to my end, is, let's say, I consider a kind of, not mission accomplished, but at least a first part of the mission accomplished. That is bringing the views, the notion, the concept that are enshrined in the Charter, but in all the papers that have been the building blocks of the Charter, bring it into the sphere that is not the one only practiced by cultural practitioners. We have been speaking of discussing fundamental things that concern the evolution of our societies as a whole. And obviously that implies questions, massive questions, because the more you get into, the more you question yourself, but are new questions. And as Cesare was very effectively pointing out, the changing the point of view by circling, which is an iterative process of the discovery, that's a human history. It's changing the points of view and finding even the gray areas between one point of view and another is a generative process, a creative process. And what certainly we need very clearly, and to me since long, but now it's clear to everybody, that we need to raise different questions in order to get different answers. And the debate we have witnessed these days, by my end, it gives us a lot of food for this endeavor. There's one notion I would take on, sorry. because it's part of, I think is important. During the conversation, Yvonne Donders, Father Spadaro, and so on, Father Spadaro at a certain point insisted strongly on two notions. One was, I don't want to use the word minorities, and the other one, I say, inhabitants and citizenship. The thought is, to me, extremely meaningful, because that approach implies that in order to be a citizen, you need to be aware of the right that you are a holder. If you are just an inhabitant in that approach, you are the one that is beneficiary if something that someone else gives to you, but if someone else doesn't give you, you're not even aware that you have the right. While citizenship implies the full awareness of your rights and duties. And this is, in connecting that notion of citizenship, that is the basis of human emancipation, as it was enshrined in the Human Rights Declaration. I think, connecting with the work that the Charter is doing, and where it plays in cultural participation in the process of human development, I think is a very important understanding of the larger value that we are doing. And even the very interesting debate between Spadaro and Donders, that basically they were saying the same things, but from a different angle. Donders was saying, listen, we need to care that to protect the human rights of minorities. And Spadaro was saying, okay, listen, but don't look at them as minorities. And Donders say, yes, but in terms of minorities, I'm also thinking to the elder at the moment because they are fragile. The point is, there is a power issue behind. Oh, sorry, I lost my audio. There's a power issue. It's not just truly minorities and minority. It's who takes responsibility to enable, who's and how, to enable those that are not yet fully citizens because they are either aware or not recognize their fundamental rights to be such. And they can be minorities or not even minorities. And in the power balance of the world we are living, actually, if you look at the impact of financial economy, basically the majority of humanity is not only unaware, but is not entitled to fulfilling their rights. And I think that the debate we are in and we have actually put in place, it strikes there. And it strikes there with this fundamental understanding that the fulfillment of cultural rights, that is fulfillment to freely create, discover the capabilities, okay, is a fundamental struggle in order to rebalance power in a world of inequalities. And what it then has rightfully, in different ways, Jordi and Francois were saying before, the Charter, the capabilities of the Charter are not the, let's say, are not the single solutions, but they are the way you have to play with in order to enable the processes that made you, me, those that are listening, and even more those that are not listening, capable to develop their full citizenship. This is, by my point of view, an enormous learning and an enormous step forward, but on a path that is extremely long. And I'm truly, truly grateful to everyone that has as a single person, or as a representative of a community, as a representative of a government, we had political leaders, we had people from the private sector, we had academia, we had very activists. To each one artist, I really want to extend my personal thanks and deep thanks of the city I temporarily represent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I cannot. I think that we have a special video contribution by Karima Benoun, who's the UN Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, who's been following the conference and raising questions and being in touch on a daily basis during the conference and before. And she wanted to address us this message has been specially crafted for the circumstances. So I would ask
Hello. I thank the organizers for this important digital convening and send my sincere cultural solidarity to all of you in these difficult times. We mourn the now more than 1 million people around the world who have died from COVID-19, including leading cultural figures lost to the pandemic in every region of the world. We must honor their memories by continuing to promote a nourishing cultural life for everyone. Culture is the heart of our response to COVID-19. While we must be separated by physical distancing, culture can still bring us together safely, and culture allows us to maintain and even strengthen our connections with one another when we need them the most. I thank all the artists and cultural practitioners around the world who are making our lives better and strengthening us through their work during this challenging season. I pledge that we will stand with them now as their livelihoods are threatened, and going forward, we will stand with them to preserve and protect and rebuild cultural life and the institutions and spaces which enable their work in accordance with the dictates of public health. Indeed, culture is a core component of public health and vital to human well-being. One of the cultural values we must emphasize going forward is solidarity, which is critical to pandemic responses. This is a moment to emphasize provisions such as Article 15, Paragraph 4 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which recognizes the importance of transnational cooperation in achieving cultural rights, including the rights to take part in cultural life and to benefit from scientific progress. That right is essential for securing the right to health. It is challenging to be asked to imagine a post-COVID era when the hope of getting beyond the pandemic sometimes seems very remote. However, it is clear that going forward requires a cultural rights perspective, both to the question of how we survive this difficult today and how we imagine a better tomorrow. The rights of everyone to take part in cultural life without discrimination and to artistic and scientific freedoms are guaranteed by international law. Everyone has a right to participate in and be consulted about policies to ensure these rights. All this remains true. Even in these trying times, cultural rights are not a luxury. They are key to the overall implementation of universal human rights and a crucial part of the responses to many current challenges, from discrimination and poverty to COVID-19 itself. Moreover, the safeguarding and promotion of culture contributes directly to many of the Sustainable Development Goals: safe and sustainable cities, the promotion of gender equality, and peaceful and inclusive societies. Transformation in a post-COVID era from a cultural rights perspective should be envisaged across several time frames. In the short term, we must work with urgency to guarantee financial support for artists, cultural practitioners, and cultural institutions. The centrality of culture as a coping mechanism in these times offers us a vital advocacy tool. Faced with the grave difficulties of the pandemic, we must remember, as the 2020 Rome Charter says, that culture sometimes is the solution and sometimes can help us to find the solutions. I also appreciate the Charter's emphasis on sharing cultures and creativity so as to strengthen social and democratic life. We've never needed to do those things so much. Taken together, all this means we need nothing less than a global cultural plan to keep alive the culture and the cultural life, which helps to keep us alive. It should be locally driven and globally supported and coordinated. In the short and medium terms, we must continue to safely reconfigure public cultural life, including in digital spaces, with offerings for all sectors of society, including persons with disabilities. Human rights guarantees apply online, and public powers need to ensure access to cyberspace for all. Essential human rights commitments to non-discrimination and inclusion of diverse voices must be maintained, even in the face of crushing budget cuts. From the medium to the longer term, we will be watching for safer times when more public cultural life and greater shared use of public spaces becomes possible again. We must commit to supporting that renaissance, emphasizing that as important as digital cultural life may be, it is a complement, not an alternative, to a shared public cultural life when that becomes safe again. Such efforts must, of course, be shaped by public health expertise. Whatever the time frame, we must not give up on the dream of a better tomorrow based on new construction, not just reconstruction. A better tomorrow in which we consider, for example, more climate-friendly ways to do our work in the future. I so appreciate the Rome Charter's emphasis not only on shaping more democratic and inclusive cities, but cities which are sustainable. On this point, let me mention that my next report for the UN General Assembly, to be presented in just a few weeks' time on October 22nd, focuses on climate change and cultural rights. The cultural and cultural rights dimensions of the current climate emergency have too often been overlooked. In fact, the cultures and cultural rights of all are at risk, with some populations facing the threat of cultural extinction. For example, some of the world's great cities and cultural capitals may become too hot to be livable sometime in the next 50 years. The negative impacts of climate change on human cultures and on the enjoyment of cultural rights, as well as the positive potential of cultures and the exercise of cultural rights to serve as critical tools in responding to the climate emergency, must both be placed on the international agenda. Only a synthesis of environmental, cultural, and human rights perspectives on these issues can provide the holistic approach essential for responding to catastrophic climate change. The Rome Charter calls on us all to be brave enough to imagine different, better, more sustainable ways of living together. Let us heed that call. The outcome depends on all our actions. Let me end with one word. It is a word from a story that I grew up with called the Lorax. This word underscores the importance of the Rome Charter's appeal to us all to act and to consider what the outcome will be if we do not. This is the word that Dr. Seuss's mythical creature, the Lorax, left for a child, along with the last remaining seed for a disappearing tree in his environmentally degraded world. That word is simply unless. Unless. Thank you.
I think we have the
and now we
pleasure.
Yes, and we have the pleasure to welcome Emilia Says, the Secretary General of UCLG, who worked on the Rome Charter.
It's more than work. It's actually whose work has made possible the Rome Charter to become, to go up on the trees of political decision-making on UCLG. So that's... Hello, Emilia. It's to you, the floor.
Salve, salve Roma, salve a tutti.
Ciao.
I feel a little bit the custodian of the Rome Charter now. Not so much the creator, you have done most of the work, but certainly the custodian, and knowing that once that something is created is no longer belonging to anybody but to everybody, actually. And I think that this is what entails to bring the Rome Charter to the center of policy making, of a constituency of local and regional governments that will need to work with the communities and that are at the service of the communities. As I was saying during the first day of this inspiring moment that we have shared together, the Rome Charter is for us an invitation to discuss the transformation that we need from a different angle, from a different perspective. And it is putting the closest sphere of government to the people at the core of that activity, inviting them to take responsibility, basically, to take the lead, to make sure that even if we don't have all the solutions, even if we don't have all the answers, we trigger the transformation and at least we lead the debate. There are many unknowns in these trying times that we are going through, but there are also things that we know, that we have documented, that we have tested, and one of those things is our own creativity. And the notion that we need to go beyond survival. And the Rome Charter is helping us deepening around those thoughts. And from my perspective and from what I have been hearing throughout these days, it can really help us refocus. It can help us maybe not changing priorities, but accelerating some of the priorities. And it can also allow us to see the world from the perspective of rights, yes, but also from the perspective of creativity. To understand the importance of a new generation of rights. At a moment of transformation, it will be impossible to continue living by the same rights. We will need to revisit them, to make them evolve. And if you see culture embedded in all of the rights, that gives you actually a lot of power because you are including more and more of us, more people. So I found the discussions very interesting. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to be with you throughout, but if you look at our live tweeting of this event, it's quite impressive, the range of things that we have covered. Françoise and Jordi have highlighted some of them. There are a couple that I would like to highlight. I found the discussion around the importance of making the difference between culture and fetishism, minorities, and how that can be used by tourism, very, very relevant, because this is a very practical issue that our membership, local and regional governments around the world are facing. How much is this culture and protecting heritage, and how much is using this for as a consuming good, a good for consumption. I found also very interesting this food dimension. I mean, all of us. I mean, if you talk with anybody in the world, we all think our culture has the greatest food, and food is certainly part of culture. It's something that might not be there at first sight, but something that will become extremely important also in the future when we continue working on rethinking our relationship with with nature. And next year, the big international agenda, the big policy-making agenda will be a lot around food. From United Cities and local governments, we are trying to make sure that we approach the food systems from a different perspective, from a more democratic perspective, actually, that we deal with them as access for food. And I think that looking at it from this cultural perspective that we have been hearing throughout the conference will be extremely useful for us. We've also talked a lot about decentralization of cultural policies, about public space, about the very, very important role that culture needs to play in democracy. And I was hearing the Vice Mayor of Barcelona this morning saying, look, what we are facing is actually a democratic challenge. And that democratic challenge will need to guide our discussions about transformation. Now, I think that the Rome Charter can be that tool. It's not the only tool, probably, but a very, very important tool. And that's why I feel as United Cities and local governments can actually be a very important custodian of this work that you have all done and that you have been discussing. I also very much agree with Françoise that some of the new things that have come up in this conference will need to feed not only into the local application of the Charter, but also in the future discussion that we need to have. And that this Charter will be the basis for co-creation of many different policies and many different approaches. And one of the most important ones that I think we will need to address is the necessity, I said this during the first day, I think, the necessity to accept that the kind of society that we know now, which sees the human being as someone that produces and consumes things, will need to be transformed to see the human being as someone that actually creates and stimulates creation of others, but also that takes care of others. And this is the step that COVID is pushing us to do. Change not our priorities, but how do we define some of the core things that we do? What do we consider essential and not? And up until now, when we talk about basic public services, which, by the way, are really in jeopardy in this era, we are very dependent on them, but our ecosystems of public service delivery are suffering greatly from lack of finances, from capacity. When you look at public service delivery and you look at basic services or essential services, as we call them in different parts of the world, very few people list culture. Very few. We need to change that. That's the game changer that we need to bring to the table. And that is what will allow us to change the paradigm of development and push for the notion that you don't act local and think global, but you actually need to think local and act globally as humanity to make sure that solidarity remains that beacon of security now. It's no longer about doing the right thing, but it is much more than that. If we don't build solidarity in our policies, then we will not be able to survive. And tackling some of the challenges that are here already and will increase, like the rapporteur was saying, like climate change, will need us to look at our policy development from that perspective. The weakest of us will represent our global strength. The weakest of us, not the strongest. Our global strength depends on how we perceive that. And that very relevant discussion that Luca was bringing up about what is minorities or not, and how power is entrusted or not, are some of the critical issues that we are allowed to rethink through the prism of this Rome Charter. So what is next? Okay, the Rome Charter has been presented to the Executive Bureau of United Cities and Local Governments, which is a very, very representative mechanism of local and regional governments around the world. They have recommended that we continue working on it. We have done it. We have met the objective, Luca. We are here. The Rome conference is happening, and we are bringing the results of this Rome conference and the final text of the Charter to our World Council. Our World Council consists of over 345 local elected representatives from all over the world, from different cities, from different towns, from different associations of local and regional governments. And they will adopt this charter as a key policy mechanism of United Cities and local governments. Our next step is beyond UCLG. I think the next challenge that we have as constituency of local and regional governments is to develop a new pact for the future. And a pact where we don't need to wait for national governments or international institutions to give us the sign that they want to have us at the table. We need to develop this pact with organized civil society, with organized communities all over the world. And we are trying to do that within the framework of our town hall works that we call Cities Are Listening. For a very long time, we have been claiming you need to listen to cities. We are managing to have the ear of the international community, and now it's our turn to listen to our communities. Cities are listening, and we need to develop a global pact for transformation, for building different indeed, not for rebuilding what we know is a failing system. So that is actually what is next. I am very excited to report that we will have our Culture Summit, as you have heard, in Izmir next year in September 2021. We don't know how that is going to be, but I would like to follow the example of this conference in Rome. I think this kind of conferences are the future. Our first hybrid conference has proven to be a true global exercise, and that's what I hope our next UCLG Culture Summit in Izmir will be as well. It's in our hands now. It's in our hands to actually make sure that the values, the principles, and the ideas that are embedded in the Rome Charter are part and parcel of our future policies. Luca, it's the beginning of change in UCLG. I am certain that with the policy capital that we have gathered in Durban in our last Congress, and with this work that we are doing here, and all the practices that we have been able to gather throughout this COVID pandemic, through the live learning experiences, with the support of the communities, of the experts, of the academics, of all of these actors that are accompanying us, we can lead the conversation for transformation. I'm convinced. I want to thank your teams, the team in Rome, because you have done a great job and you have shown us the way for the future work of a truly global organization like ours. And I would like to thank also my own team in United Cities and local governments. We are small, but oh boy, are we powerful. Thank you very much, Jordi, Sarah. Thank you, all of you, for the work that you have done. Thank you, Marta, as well. Thank you, Roma Capitale, and thank you, Macro, for actually letting us live together this experience. Thank you, Mayor Raji. But above all, Luca, I told you yesterday, I am following your leads. The only thing that is left to say is, please keep discovering, keep creating, keep sharing and protecting. But above all, keep enjoying and keep healthy. Thank you very much.
Just before we turn to Luca for the final remarks, I just wanted to say we're getting tons of messages coming through online as messages of thanks for the enlightening discussions that have taken place over the last few days. Lots of lovely messages coming through. Over to Luca.
It's a kind of challenging thing, I must say. So I'll start from the easy one. The easy one is to thank the people that worked at the organization, and the one that you mentioned, Emilia, the team of the Cultural Committee, Agenda 21, Jordi. I'm sorry, I've just mentioned Jordi because I'm not sure I can mention all the others and I wouldn't miss one, but I know Sara and many of the others. They have done a tremendous job. And Francois, we did before. I'd like to thank the part of my team, the one that more closely worked at this initiative. Carla Schiavone first, and Davide Sacco here, and Floriana Pischedda, Emiliano Paoletti, Luca Carosella, Francesca Guinan, Federica e altri. Sono molti altri alla fine.
And many others. So I've moved to Italian. I thought I wanted to speak in Italian. And so at the end, we are going to see a picture that was taken last night without them knowing. We photographed the group of people who worked here and who have made this hybrid experimental conference possible. We can say that you were really, really good. All those who worked to make this possible, all those who contributed to moderating, coordinating the discussions, that were so many, and that allowed us to discover how a hybrid conference works, because we didn't know how it worked. And so in this case, too, we learned something. I would like to thank the hundreds, actually, we speak about thousands of people, individuals who decided to follow this conference and the pathway of this charter online. It's a huge number. I can't remember exactly how many people. I think I was sent these numbers, but I don't want to open my mobile phone. I don't like it. It's like something like 7,000 people, a huge number. So many contacts and viewers, etc. So what's next? And you have already answered this, but well, what's coming next actually depends on each and every one of us. And the charter was drafted, and I want to thank those who insisted that it should be drafted. It was formulated as a document that can be taken by everyone, but used by everyone, and including and can be turned into action by all those who can translate it into their own cultures and dimensions. It's a call for action, as it was defined, that provides tools to move on to action. So what happens next depends. It's like an Italian cake called mille foglie. It's made of different layers of crisp pastry, and you've got cream in between. But to have this cake, you need all these levels, these layers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be tasty without them. So we're speaking about institution, cultural institution, choices made by the cities, exchanges, contacts among the various councillors of the Italian cities who look at the Charter, thinking about what to do with it in their own cities. There was Bologna, Naples, Turin, Ancona, Bari, Milan, who was not there. But anyway, anybody can come sort of endorse this charter, understanding how it can be put into practice in their own policies. And then there is Rome, that with its council has formally adopted this charter last week in order to make it not just a reference document, but also a document that becomes binding in the tasks that the cultural institutes that Roma Capitale participates in and finances, which are important institutions such as the National Theatre, the Contemporary Art Pole, the Great Auditorium, the theatre of the Opera Theatre. So it asks these institutions to endorse the Charter, and then in the next 3 years, in their programs, they must start implementing these principles. They will all do it differently, but we also asked Palazzo delle Esposizioni, that is chaired by Cesare Petroiuti, we asked this hub to coordinate the implementation of this charter, and therefore do that in direct cooperation with the municipalities and the various institutions, and to promote this document to make it pass from an initial stage, which was merely internal to the institutions, to make it part of a pathway focusing on discussion and debate within the city, because we are deeply convinced that, and I am deeply convinced that the Charter highlights the strength of the approach that we adopted in Rome's cultural policies, but also looks at limitations. And the debates that we had over these past days allow us to imagine how the governance tools for the city must change in the years to come if, as we have pledged, these are not just rhetoric, but a real commitment. And this is a commitment that I want to make on behalf of my administration, of course, until it's going to be in power. But anyway, I think that once it becomes the heritage of the city, regardless of political majorities, and I will make sure that this is part of everybody's heritage, this is going to stay. It will continue to produce effects. And as you were saying, Emilia, rightly enough, the creation of the launch of a process is started by someone. So somebody kindles, sparkles a flame, and then the pathway becomes the pathway of everyone. There is no copyright. It's like a commons, and the more it is so, the more it will participate and be impactful and and promote a change that we all feel is very much needed. And for a long time, I thought that our times were the times in which we had the responsibility of rooting, of planting some seeds for plants we would not be able to see in terms of their growth. And I apologize. I think that the pandemic has forced us to see that these seeds have blossomed to a certain extent, and that we perhaps we will be able to actually see part of these plants grow. And I apologize again. I'm not just speaking about our children, but ourselves will be able to see these plants grow, at least a little bit of them. So I think that we'll be able to see some of this growth. And what we did here is really a part along this path. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Holly came from Miami to LA, hitchhiked away across the USA, plucked her eyebrows on the way, shaved her legs, and then he was a she. She says, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Said, hey honey, take a walk on the wild side. Candy came from out on the island. In the back room, she was everybody's darling. But she never lost her head. Even when she was given head, she says, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Horns.